Ah, there you are, dear friend. Come in from the night air. Yes, settle yourself there by the fire. The evening has grown cold, has it not? But here, within these round walls of earth and wood, we are safe and warm. The sheer knows how to keep the darkness at bay, even when the stars themselves seem distant. I see you have brought your blanket. Good. Wrap it close about your shoulders. There is no need for anything but comfort tonight. The kettle has boiled, the fire burns low and steady, and the world beyond this little door can wait until morning. You wish to hear a story, do you not? I can see it in your eyes, that quiet hunger for tales of elder days. Well, you have come to the right place, and to the right teller, if I may say so myself. For I have wandered long through the ages of this world, and I carry within my memory stories that would take 1,000 nights to tell in full. But tonight, let's speak of something particular. Something that burns even now in my recollection, like 3 flames that can never be extinguished. Tonight, I shall tell you of the Silmarils. You have heard the name, perhaps, whispered in old songs, mentioned in fragments of verse that travelers bring from distant lands. But do you know what they truly were? Do you understand why 3 small jewels could shape the fate of the world, could drive the greatest of the elder to madness and ruin, could inspire deeds of valor beyond measure, and crimes of sorrow be forgiveness? No, I thought not. Few do now. The memory of the elder days grows dim, even among the elves who remain in Middle-earth. But I remember, and tonight, by this gentle fire, I shall help you remember too. Close your eyes if you wish. Let my voice carry you backward through the ages, past the rising and falling of kingdoms, past the changing of the stars, to a time when the world was young and full of light. A light that we can scarcely imagine now, for it was the light of the 2 trees of Fëanor, and nothing in Middle-earth has ever matched their radiance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin at the beginning, or as close to it as our tale requires. In the beginning, before the sun and moon, before the stars were set in their courses, the Valar dwelt in Fëanor, the blessed realm far to the west, and in that land, upon the green mound of Iselohar, there grew 2 trees of surpassing beauty. Telpirin was one, the elder of the 2, and its leaves were of dark green above, but shining silver beneath. When the winds of Fëanor stirred its branches, a glittering light fell from it like rain upon the grass below. Lorelin was the other, the younger tree, and its leaves were of pale gold edged with flame, and its flowers were like clusters of golden fire that gave forth both warmth and radiance. These 2 trees waxed and waned in turn, each shining for 7 hours, while the other rested, and in the hour of their mingling, when the light of silver and the light gold blended together, the land of Fëanor knew a beauty that has never been equaled. This was the light that blessed the undying lands, that fell upon the faces of the Valar and the elves who dwelt there, that made every growing thing more fair and every living being more wise. Now, among the elves who came to Fëanor in the great journey from the waters of Cuvininen, there were none more gifted than the Noldor. They were craftsmen and scholars, makers and learners, and they delighted in the creation of beautiful things. They worked with gems and metals, with stone and glass, and they learned much from all the smith, who was the Valar of craft and making. But among all the Noldor, there was one whose skill surpassed all others. His name was Curufin, but he was called Fëanor, which means spirit of fire, and that name suited him well, for there burned within Fëanor a flame of creativity that drove him to achievements beyond anything the elves had ever known. Fëanor was the son of Finn, High King of the Noldor, and of Real Serind, who was the most skilled in needlework of all the elven women. But Real had poured so much of her potent into bringing Fëanor into the world that she grew weary beyond recovery, and she departed to the halls of Mandos, leaving her son without a mother's love. This loss marked Fëanor deeply, and perhaps it was one reason why he loved so fiercely the things he made with his own hands. They were the children of his spirit, and he would not willingly let them go. Fëanor grew in skill and renown. He created the Tengwar, the letters that the elves still use for writing. He made gems brighter than any that had been fashioned before. He devised the Palantiri, the seeing stones, though that was a lesser work compared to what was to come. For in the fullness of his power, Fëanor conceived a work that would be the greatest of all his creations, and the most terrible in its consequences. He looked upon the light of the two trees, that mingled radiance of silver and gold, and he thought to himself that such beauty should not be allowed to fade. For the trees, though they were blessed by the Valar, were nonetheless living things, and all living things must one day pass away. What if some accident befell them? What if some malice sought to harm them? The light would be lost forever, and all the ages to come would be poorer for its absence. And so Fëanor set his mind to a task that none had attempted before. He would capture the light of the two trees, blend it together in perfect harmony, and preserve it forever in works of his own making. Long he labored in secret, in workshops that none were permitted to enter. He gathered materials from across Valinor, substances whose names are now forgotten, crystals and essences and powders whose properties only he understood. He worked by the mingled light of the trees, and he poured into his work not only his skill but his very spirit, his love, his longing for permanence in a world that seemed always to be changing. And at last, after years of patient toil, he succeeded. The Silmarils, 3 jewels, each about the size of a closed fist, though they seemed larger when you looked upon them, as if they contained spaces greater than their outer forms suggested. Their outer shells were made of a substance called Silmaril, which Fëanor himself had invented, a crystalline material harder than diamond, untouchable by any force in ardor. But within those shells, captured and preserved for all eternity, was the living light of the two trees. Imagine, if you can, holding in your hands a jewel that contained the essence of dawn and twilight, of moonrise and sunset, all blended together in perfect union. A light that was not reflected but generated from within. That pulsed and shifted and moved like a living flame, yet was gentle as starlight upon a still pool. A light that seemed to carry within it all the hope and beauty of the world, distilled and concentrated into a form that could be held and treasured. The Silmarils were such jewels, and they were more than merely beautiful, they were holy. Vada, the Lady of the Stars, the most beloved of all the Valar, blessed the Silmarils with a sacred virtue. She hallowed them so that no mortal hand, no creature of evil, no being with malice in their heart could touch them and remain unharmed. The jewels would burn the flesh of the unworthy, would sear the spirit of the wicked, would reject with fierce pain any who sought to possess them wrongfully. This blessing was meant as a protection. But like many protections, it was also a prophecy of dangers to come. When Fëanor revealed the Silmarils to the Valar and to the elves of Valinor, there was wonder beyond measure. Even the Valar themselves marveled at what Fëanor had achieved, for not even they, with all their power, could have created such things. Or the smith praised Fëanor's work above all crafts that had ever been made. Yavanna, who had sung the two trees into being, looked upon the Silmarils with something like awe, for in them she saw her beloved trees preserved against whatever harm might come. But not all who looked upon the Silmarils felt only wonder and joy. In those days there dwelt in Valinor a being of great power and great malice, though he concealed his true nature behind a from and honeyed words. His name was Melkor, and he was the mightiest of all the Ainur, the first among the servants of Vatar himself. But Melkor had turned away from the purposes of his creator. He desired to rule, to possess, to bend all things to his own will. He had caused strife and ruin in the world before its making was complete, and though he had been defeated and had seemingly repented, his heart remained as dark as ever. Melkor looked upon the Silmarils, and he desired them, not because of their beauty, though they were beautiful beyond description, not because of their craftsmanship, though they were the greatest works ever made by the hands of the children of Vatar. No, Melkor desired the Silmarils because they contained the light of the two trees, and that light was sacred to the Valar, and anything that was beloved by the Valar, Melkor wished to corrupt or destroy. But even more than that, Melkor desired the Silmarils because he could not make such things himself. For all his power, for all his might, Melkor could only twist and ruin and imitate. He could not truly create. He could make mockeries of beautiful things, could breed orcs in cruel imitation of elves, could raise dark towers in parody of the halls of the Valar. But he could not bring into being something new and good and beautiful. And the Silmarils, those jewels of living light, remind him of his own limitations, his own failures, his own fallen state. And so Melkor coveted the Silmarils with a hunger that knew no bounds. But he was patient, was Melkor, patient and cunning. He did not move once against Fëanor, did not reveal his desire openly. Instead, he began to whisper poison into the ears of the Noldor. He told them that the Valar were keeping them confined in Valinor, preventing them from ruling the wider world. That was their birthright. He suggested that Fëanor's brothers and their children were plotting against him, seeking to steal his treasures and his place as heir to the High Kingship. He hinted that the Silmarils were too great a work to be the possession of any single elf, that Fëanor was selfish to keep them for himself. These lies found fertile ground in the hearts of the Noldor, for they were proud and ambitious, and Fëanor most of all. Slowly, suspicion and resentment began to grow among the elves. Anor drew away from his kin, became secretive and possessive. He began to wear the Silmarils on his brow, even in times of peace, as if he feared that someone might try to take them from him. He loved the jewels with a fierce and jealous love, and that love began to twist his spirit, to narrow his vision, to turn his great gifts toward darkness rather than light. At last the lies of Melkor were discovered, and the Valar summoned him to judgment. But Melkor did not wait to face their wrath. He fled from Valinor, disappearing into the shadows of the world, and for a time the blessed realm breathed easier. But the damage was done. The suspicion and discord that Melkor had sown did not disappear with his departure. Fëanor had raised his sword against his own brother, had threatened him with death. And for this crime he was exiled from Tirion, the great city of the Noldor. He went to live in the fortress of Fëanor in the north of Valinor, and with him went his father Finn, and with them went the Silmarils. And in the darkness beyond the borders of Valinor, Melkor waited and watched and planned. He was not alone in his exile, for there was in those days a creature of primordial malice, a being of darkness and hunger older than the world itself. Her name was Ungoliant, and she dwelt in a ravine in the south of Aman, feeding on whatever light she could find and vomiting forth a darkness so absolute that even the eyes of the Valar could not pierce it. Ungoliant had been a servant of Melkor in ages past, or perhaps an ally, for she was too wild and hungry to truly serve anyone. But she shared his hatred of the light, and when Melkor came to her with a proposal, she listened. Together, Melkor and Ungoliant crept through the shadows toward the two trees. It was the time of a great festival, when all the Valar and most of the elves were gathered in the city of Volmar, celebrating and making merry. The trees were unguarded, for who would dare to harm them in the heart of the blessed realm? Melkor dared. With a great spear, black and venomous, he stabbed both trees to their very roots, and their sap poured out like blood upon the ground. And Ungoliant, with her endless art, drank that sap, drank the very light of the trees. And she grew vast and terrible, swollen with stolen radiance, vomiting forth a darkness that spread across the land like a tide of despair. The two trees died. Their light went out of the world forever. And in that moment, the blessed realm was plunged into a darkness it had never known, a darkness that seemed to have weight and substance, that pressed upon the eyes and the heart and the spirit like a physical thing. But Melkor and Ungoliant did not stop there. Under cover of that impenetrable darkness, they fled northward to Fëanor, to the fortress where Fëanor had gone into exile. And there, while the rest of Valinor reeled in shock and grief, Melkor broke in the stronghold, slew Finn the High King as he stood alone in defense of his son's treasures, and stole the Silmarils. When the darkness finally lifted, when the Valar at last managed to drive by the shadows with what little light remained to them, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The trees were dead. Finn was dead. And the Silmarils? Those jewels that alone contained the living light of the trees were gone, carried away by Melkor into the outer darkness. He had been in Volmar when the attack came, or even in his exile. He had been summoned to make peace with his brother. He had not been there to defend his father. He had not been there to protect his treasures. And when he learned what had happened, when he saw his father's body lying cold upon the stones of Formenos, when he realized that the Silmarils were in the hands of his greatest enemy, something broke inside him. Or perhaps something had been waiting in the darkness of his spirit finally broke free. Anna stood before all the Noldor had gathered in their grief and confusion, and he spoke to them with words of fire. He cursed Melkor with a curse that would echo through all the ages to come, naming him Morgoth, the black enemy of the world. He called upon his people to leave Valinor, to pursue Morgoth to the ends of the earth, to reclaim the Silmarils or die in the attempt. He spoke of the wide lands of Middle-earth, of the freedom they would find there, of the glory they would win in war against the darkness. And then Fëanor did something terrible. He swore an oath, standing beneath the stars, for the sun and moon had not yet been made. Fëanor called upon El-Vatar himself to witness his vow. He swore that he and his 7 sons would pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world any creature, whether Valar, demon or elf or man, or any creature great or small, good or evil, that might come to hold a Silmaril and keep it from them. And his sons swore with him, binding themselves to that terrible oath with words that could never be unsaid, with vows that would pursue them through all the ages of the world, driving them to deeds of darkness that would make the very stars weep. The oath of Fëanor. It was a promise of vengeance that would become a curse, a noble purpose that would twist into madness, a love of beautiful things that would lead to murder and ruin. And it would shape the history of the First Age, bringing sorrow upon sorrow, until at last only ashes remained. But the Noldor did not know this then. They heard Fëanor's words, and many of them were stirred by his passion, by his grief, by his call to action. Some followed him because they truly shared his desire for vengeance. Some followed because they wished to see the wide world beyond Valinor. Some followed because their friends and kin were going, and they did not wish to be left behind. And some, perhaps, followed because they sensed that great events were unfolding, and they wished to be part of them whatever the cost. But not all the Noldor wished to go. And those who went could not agree on how to make the journey. For Middle-earth lay far to the east, across the great sea, and the Noldor had no ships. The Teleri, the sea elves who dwelt on the coast of Valinor in the haven of Ulquland, had ships, beautiful white ships with swan-shaped prows, but they refused to lend them to Fëanor's desperate venture. They were friends of the Valar, and they would not aid in defiance of the powers. They would not help the Noldor to leave the blessed realm. Enna demanded the ships. The Teleri refused. Fëanor threatened. The Teleri stood firm. And then Fëanor attacked, the kinslaying at Alqualond, the first of the great crimes that the oath would inspire. Elf raised sword against elf, and blood was shed upon the white quays of the harbour, blood that stained the waves and the stones, and the souls of all who took part in that slaughter. The Teleri fought bravely, but they were not warriors, and they were taken by surprise. Many were killed. The ships were taken, and as the Noldor sailed away from Alqualond, their hands red with the blood of their kindred, a figure appeared upon a high rock overlooking the sea. It was Mandos himself, the doomsman of the Valar, he who keeps the souls of the dead and speaks the judgments of the powers. And in a voice like thunder, he pronounced the doom of the Noldor. "Tears unnumbered ye shall shed," he said, "and the Valar will fence Valinor against you, and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains. On the house of Fëanor the wrath of the Valar lieth, from the west unto the uttermost east. And upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever. Some of the Noldor, hearing this dreadful prophecy, turned back, but Fëanor and his sons pressed on, and many followed them, some out of loyalty, some out of desperation, some because they feared that to turn back now would be to admit that all they had done was in vain. The journey to Middle-earth was long and bitter. The ships were too few to carry all the Noldor at once, and Fëanor, in his madness and his haste, took his own followers and sailed ahead, leaving his brother Fingolfin and all his people stranded on the shores of Valinor. And when Fëanor reached the shores of Middle-earth, he burned the ships. He burned them so that there could be no turning back. He burned them so that his brother could not follow. He burned them because the fire in his spirit had become a fire of destruction, consuming everything in its path, including his own kin and his own honor. But let us leave Fëanor for a moment, though his tale is not yet done. Let us speak of Morgoth, and of what he did with the Silmarils he had stolen. Morgoth fled northward across the great sea, carried by the darkness that Ungoliant had woven around them both. But when they reached Middle-earth, when they came to the ruins of his ancient fortress of Angband, in the far north, Ungoliant turned upon her ally. She demanded payment for her services. She had been promised treasures, and she would have them. But the Silmarils Morgoth would not give. He clutched them to his breast, those jewels of living light, and he refused to part with them, even though Ungoliant's webs of darkness were strangling him, even though her hunger threatened to consume him entirely. In his extremity, Morgoth let out a cry so terrible that it echoed across the mountains and awoke his servants who had lain hidden in the depths of Angband. The Barogs came, those spirits of fire and shadow who had served Morgoth since before the making of the world, and with their whips of flame they can gull Ungoliant away into the darkness of the south. And Morgoth, at last, was left alone with his prize. He set the Silmarils into his iron crown, binding them there with bands of the hardest metal, and he placed that crown upon his head and never removed it again. The jewels burned him, of course. The blessing of Vardar ensured that they would sear his flesh with unending pain. But Morgoth endured the agony, for he would not be parted from the Silmarils. And his hands were blackened and scarred from that hour forward, burned by the holy light that he had stolen but could never truly possess. And from his throne in Angband, Morgoth looked out upon Middle-earth and began to rebuild his power. He bred orcs in countless numbers. He raised armies of monsters and demons. He sent out his will to corrupt and destroy all that was good and fair in the world. And upon his brow the Silmarils blazed with stolen light, a mockery of all that was holy, a symbol of his triumph over the Valar and the elves. When Fëanor and his people arrived in Middle-earth, they found a land already shadowed by Morgoth's return. But Fëanor was undaunted. He led his army northward toward Angband, burning with the desire to reclaim his treasures and avenge his father's death. The first great battle of the wars of Beleriand was fought beneath the stars, for the sun and moon had not yet risen. It was called the Battle Under Stars. Dagon Nuin Giliath in the elven tongue, and the Noldor won a great victory, scattering the armies of Morgoth and driving them back toward the gates of Angband. But Fëanor, in his fury, pressed on ahead of his army. He pursued the fleeing orcs almost to the very gates of Angband itself, and there he was surrounded by Barogs. They came upon him out of the darkness, demons of fire and shadow, and even Fëanor, greatest of the Noldor, could not stand against them all. He was mortally wounded. His sons fought their way to his side and carried him away from the battlefield, but his wounds were beyond healing. And as he lay dying, looking northward the mountains behind which Angband lay hidden, Fëanor knew that he would never reclaim the Silmarils. He knew that his quest had failed, that his oath could never be fulfilled, that all the bloodshed and betrayal had been for nothing. Some say that as he died, Fëanor cursed Morgoth 3 times, and that each curse was like a wound that even a Valar could feel. Some say that his spirit was so fairy that when it left his body, his flesh crumbled into ash, and nothing remained of the greatest of the Noldor but memory and sorrow. And some say that even in death, Fëanor refused to accept that the Silmarils were lost forever, that his spirit would not go to the halls of Mandos to await the end of the world, but lingered somewhere in the shadows, still yearning for the jewels he had made, still burning with a fire that could never be quenched. But his sons remained, bound by the oath they had sworn, and they continued the war against Morgoth, though they knew in their hearts that it could not be won. Let me tell you their names, these sons of Fëanor, for their fates were woven into the fate of the Silmarils, and you should know them. Maedhros was the eldest, tall and copper-haired, noble of bearing, the most temperate and wise of Fëanor's sons. He would suffer greatly for his father's crimes, and yet he would also commit crimes of his own when the oath drove him to desperation. Magla was the second son, a singer and a poet, whose voice was said to be the most beautiful of all the elves. He was gentler than his brothers, and the blood they shed weighed more heavily upon his spirit. Celegorm was the third, a hunt and a friend of Orome, the huntsman of the Valar. He kept a great hound named Huan, who had been a gift from Orome himself. Celegorm was proud and cruel, and he would do terrible things in the name of the oath. Carantha was the fourth, dark-haired and quick-tempered, harsh of speech but not without honor. He ruled over wide lands in the east of Beleriand. Crufin was the fifth, and he was most like his father in skill and in temperament. He was a master craftsman, cunning and ruthless, and his influence over his brother Celegorm led them both into darkness. Emerald and Amras were the youngest twins, hunters who preferred the wild forests to the courts of kings. Some say that Amrod was killed when Fëanor burned the ships at Nor, caught in the flames as he slept aboard. Others say he survived, but was haunted ever after by the smoke and fire that night. These seven, bound by their father's oath, would spend their lives in pursuit of the Silmarils, and every path they took would lead to sorrow. But let me not speak only of the sons of Fëanor, for the story of the Silmarils is also the story of those who stood against Morgoth, of the kingdoms of the elves and the Valar of their lords, of the coming of men into the west, and the alliances they forged with the elder kindred. When Fingolfin and his people finally reached Middle-earth, having crossed the grinding ice in the far north, because Fëanor had burned the ships, they found a land already at war. But they also found hope, for as they set foot upon the shores of Middle-earth, the moon rose for the first time, and soon after came the sun, and the long darkness was ended at last. The rising of the sun drove Morgoth's creatures into hiding, and for a time, the elves of Beleriand had respite. They built great kingdoms in the lands west of the Blue Mountains. Fingolfin ruled from Hitham in the north. Fëanor, his nephew, founded the hidden city of Nargothrond in the west. Turgon, Fingolfin's second son, built the secret city of Gondolin in a hill valley among the mountains, a place of such beauty that it was said to rival Tirion itself. And the sons of Fëanor held lands in the east, watching the passes and guarding against assault from Angband. For hundreds of years, the elves besieged Morgoth in his fortress, holding him at bay, preventing him from extending his dominion over all of Middle-earth. This was called the Siege of Angband, and during this time, the elves flourished. They built, they created, they sang songs of beauty and sorrow. Men came from the east, fleeing the darkness that had touched their own lands, and some of them allied with the elves, learning their language and their crafts, fighting beside them against the common enemy. But Morgoth was patient. For 400 years, he built his strength, bred his armies, forged his weapons in the fires beneath the earth, and when he was ready, he struck. The Battle of Sudden Flame, Dagorbrug was called. Rivers of fire poured forth from Angband, burning the grass and the trees and the elven warriors who stood in their path. Glorong the dragon, father of all dragons, led the assault, and behind him came armies of orcs beyond counting, and Balrogs in the vanguard, and all the terrors that Morgoth had bred in the darkness of his pits. The siege of Angband was broken. Many of the elven lords were slain. Fingolfin himself, in his grief and his rage, rode alone to the gates of Angband and challenged Morgoth to single combat. the Dark Lord came foremost and terrible, armed with the great hammer Grond, and he fought the High King of the Noldor before the eyes of all his servants. Fingolfin wounded Morgoth 7 times, and the Dark Lord would bear those wounds forever, limping from that day until the end of the world. But in the end, Morgoth's power was too great, and Fingolfin fell. Yet even in death, he struck one final blow, cutting off Morgoth's foot with his last stroke, and the Dark Lord limped back into his fortress, his victory bitter with pain. And still, the Silmarils blazed upon his crown, burning him without cease, reminding him always of what he had done and what had been done to him. In the years that followed, the elves fought on, but the hope dwindled. One by one, their kingdoms fell or were reduced to desperate holdouts. The sons of Fëanor lost their lands. Nargothrond was destroyed by Gorong. Only Gondolin remained hidden, a last refuge of beauty and peace in a world drowning in shadow. But it is not the great battles that I would have you remember tonight. No, let us speak of a smaller tale, a more personal story. One that brings together love and courage and the light of the Silmarils in a way that no other tale can match. Let me tell you of Beren and Elduthæan. Beren was a man, a mortal, the son of Barahir, who had saved the life of an elven king and received from him a ring as a token of friendship. But Barahir, all his companions, were slain by Morgoth's servants, and Beren alone escaped, wandering as an outlaw in the wild lands, hunted and desperate. In his wandering, Beren came to the forest of Doriath, the kingdom of Thingol and Melian. Thingol was the greatest of the elven kings who had never gone to Valinor, and Melian, his queen, was a Maya, a spirit of great power who had forsaken the blust realm for love of him. Around their kingdom, Melian had woven a fence of enchantment, the girdle of Melian, which no creature could pass against the will of the king and queen. But Beren passed through. Perhaps because he meant no harm, perhaps because his fate was tied to greater things, perhaps because love itself guided his steps. For in the forests of Doriath Beren saw Elduthæan, daughter of Thingol and Melian. Elduthæan, the most beautiful of all the children of El-Vatar. Elduthæan, whose voice was so lovely that the nightingales fell silent to hear her sing, whose dance was so graceful that the grass itself bent to follow her movements, whose face was so fair that all who looked upon were struck with wonder and longing. Beren saw her dancing in a glade beneath the stars, and he loved her from that moment, loved her with a love that would endure on death itself. And Elduthæan, for reasons that none could fully explain, loved him in return, but Thingol was not pleased, his daughter, the fairest of all elves, to marry a mortal man, a vagabond, an outlaw, a creature whose life would flicker and fade while Elduthæan remained young and beautiful through all the ages of the world. Never, he declared, never would he give his blessing to such a match. Yet Beren stood before the elven king and asked for his daughter's hand, and Thingol, in his scorn and his wrath, set him a task that no mortal could accomplish. "Bring me," he said, "a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth." It was a sentence of death, and Thingol knew it. No one could enter Angband and return alive. No one could stand before Morgoth and take anything from him. No one could touch the Silmarils and survive their holy fire. But Beren accepted the challenge. He would bring Thingol a Silmaril, or he would die in the attempt. And Elduthæan, though her father imprisoned her in a house high in the trees, though guards watched her day and night, found a way to escape and follow the man she loved. What followed was a quest of such wonder and terror that even now, remembering it, I feel my heart quicken in my chest. Beren and Elduthæan faced the servants of Morgoth, fought the great wolf Karkrath who guarded the gates of Angband, descended into the very pits of darkness where the Dark Lord sat upon his throne. And there, in the deepest dungeon of the world, Elduthæan sang. She sang a song of such power and beauty that even Morgoth was moved by it. She sang of the trees and the stars, and the sea and the sky, of all the beautiful things that Morgoth had sought to destroy. She sang of love and loss, of hope and despair, of the endless struggle between light and darkness. And as she sang, a great drowsiness fell upon Morgoth and all his court, a sleep so deep that even the Dark Lord could not resist it. And while Morgoth slept, Beren crept forward and cut a Silmaril from his iron crown. One jewel, one Silmaril, the light of the two trees, captured and preserved, and now, after so many years, reclaimed by a mortal hand. But as they fled, as they neared the gates of Angband, Carcharoth the wolf awoke. This was no ordinary elf, but a beast that Morgoth had bred and fed and taught to be the greatest of his living servants. Carcharoth barred their way, and Beren held up the Silmaril to drive him back, but the wolf was not deterred. He bit off Beren's hand at the wrist, swallowing hand and Silmaril together. And then the fire within the jewel, the holy light that burned all evil things, began to work upon the wolf from within. Carcharoth went mad with pain, with the fire burning in his belly, and he fled howling into the wild, destroying everything in his path, spreading terror and death wherever he went. Beren and Eluthian escaped from Angband, but Beren was grievously wounded, and within him was a wound that no healing could touch, for the light of the Silmaril had been close to his heart, and some part of him had been burned away by its holy fire. They returned to Dorath, to Thingol's court, and Beren stood before the king once more. Thingol looked at him, at this battered, bloodied mortal who what no elf had ever accomplished, and he asked where the Silmaril was. Beren held up the stump of his arm. "It is in my hand," he said, and Thingol at last was humbled. He saw the courage and the love that had driven this man to attempt the impossible, and he gave his blessing to the union of Beren and Elulthian. But the story was not yet ended. For Carcharoth, maddened by the fire in his belly, came to Doriath, and a great hunt was called to destroy him. Beren went on that hunt, and in the final battle he was mortally wounded, even as the wolf was slain and the Silmaril was recovered from his belly. Beren died in Eluthian's arms, there in the forest of Doriath, and his spirit went to halls of Mandos to wait its unknown fate. And Eluthian followed him. She died of grief, her spirit departing her body to seek out the man she loved even in death. And in the halls of Mandos she sang once more, sang a song of such sorrow and beauty that even the heart of Mandos was moved. And he brought her case before Man himself, the Lord of the Valar. And Man gave Eluthian a choice. She could go to Valinor, to dwell forever among the blessed, forgetting her grief in the beauty of the undying lands. Or she could return to Middle-earth, not as an immortal elf, but as a mortal woman, sharing the fate of men, subject to death and the unknown doom that awaited mortal souls beyond the circles of the world. Eluthian chose mortality. She chose to return to Middle-earth with Beren, to live a second life together. Brief as a candle flame compared to the endless ages of the elves, but filled with love and joy and the sweetness of days that are numbered. And so Beren and Eluthian lived again in a green land in Assyrian, and they had a son named Dire, who was called Dar the Fair. And when at last they died, this time for good, they passed together beyond the circles of the world, to whatever fate awaits those who die. But the Silmaril remained behind. Thingol kept it, for Beren had won it, and Eluthian was Thingol's daughter, and therefore the jewel was his by right. He had it set as the Noglama, the necklace of the dwarves, the greatest work of the smiths of Nogrod, and he wore it about his neck, and its light blessed all of Doriath with a beauty beyond measure. But the sons of Fëanor had not forgotten their oath. When they heard that a Silmaril was in Doriath, they sent messages to Thingol, demanding that he surrender the jewel to them. For had they not sworn to pursue any creature who kept a Silmaril from them? Had they not bound themselves with words that could never be unsaid? Thingol refused. The Silmaril had been won by Beren's hand and Eluthian's courage, not by the strength of the Noldor. He owed nothing to the sons of Fëanor. Let them come and take it if they dared. For a time, the sons of Fëanor held back, for Thingol was mighty and Doriath was protected by the girdle of Million. But then Thingol was slain, murdered by dwarves in a dispute over the Noglama, and Million's grief was so great that her power faded, and the girdle fell and Doriath lay open to its enemies. Dire, the son of Bern and Eluthian, inherited the Silmaril, and the sons of Enochel came for it. They attacked Doriath, they and their followers, and there was a great battle in the halls of Thingol's palace. Dire was slain. Celegorm and Curufin and Carantha were slain. Dior's young sons were taken by servants of Celegorm and abandoned in the forest to die. It was a massacre, a second kinslaying, and it achieved nothing, for the Silmaril was not found. Dire's daughter Elwing had escaped, carrying the Noglam with her, carrying the Silmaril to the Havens of Sirion in the south, where the last remnants of the elven kingdoms had gathered. And the surviving sons of Fëanor, Maedhros and Magla and Amrud, looked upon what they had done, and they despaired. But the oath still bound them. The oath would not let them rest. The oath drove them ever onward, toward more blood, more betrayal, more sorrow. Let us speak of Elwing, and of Rendil, and of the Silmarils' final journey. Elwing, the daughter of Dire, grew to womanhood in the Havens of Sirion, and she was beautiful beyond measure, for she carried the blood of Eleuthine in her veins. She married Rendil the Mariner, a lord of the Havens, a man of great courage and skill, whose father was a man and whose mother was an elf. Rendil had a dream. He dreamed of sailing to Valinor, of finding the blessed realm, and begging the Valar to come to the aid of Middle-earth, to overthrow Morgoth, and end the shadow that lay upon the world. It was a desperate hope, for the way to Valinor was closed to mortals, and the Valar had turned their backs on the exiled Noldor. But Rendil would not abandon his dream. He built a ship, the greatest ship ever made by mortal hands, and he named it Vingelet, the Foam Flower. And he sailed westward, seeking the smooth road to the undying lands. But while he was at sea, the sons of Fëanor came to the Havens of Sirion. They demanded the Silmaril. Elwing refused, and so began the third kinslaying, the last and perhaps the worst of all. The people of the Havens fought to defend their home, but the sons of Fëanor were desperate, maddened by their oath, willing to do anything to fulfill it. The battle was fierce and bloody. Amrod was slain, and many on both sides, and in the end, when all hope was lost, Elwing cast herself into the sea, the Silmaril clasped to her breast, but she did not die. Omo, the Lord of Waters, took pity on her, and he transformed her into a great white bird, and she flew over the sea until she found Vingelet and landed upon its deck, exhausted and changed and carrying the Silmaril in her beak. Rendil took the jewel and bound it upon his brow, and with its light to guide him, he sailed at last into the west, and he found Valinor, and he walked upon the shores of the blessed realm, the first mortal to set foot there since the world was made. He begged the Valar to forgive the Noldor, to have mercy on the peoples of Middle-earth, to come forth and overthrow Morgoth. And the Valar heard him. Perhaps it was the light of the Silmaril that moved them. Perhaps it was the courage of this half-mortal mariner who dared what none had dared before. Perhaps it was simply that the time had come at last for Morgoth to be cast down. The Valar prepared for war, and Rendil and Elwing, because they had come to Valinor bearing a Silmaril, were given a choice similar to the one Eleuthine had been given long before. They could be counted among the elves and live forever, or they could be counted among men and accept mortality. Elwing chose the elves, and Rendil chose with her, though his heart was more drawn to the kindred of men, and they were given a new fate, a new purpose. Rendil was set to sail forever in the heavens, carrying the Silmaril upon his brow, a light of hope for all who dwelt in Middle-earth. His ship Vingelet was hallowed and lifted into the sky, and it became the evening star and the morning star, the brightest light in all the heavens, a sign that the Valar had not abandoned the world. And Elwing dwelt in a tower by the sea, and when Rendil returned from his endless voyage across the sky, she would fly to meet him in her bird shape, and they would be together for a little while before he departed once more. One Silmaril was thus set in the heavens, to shine forever as a beacon of hope. One Silmaril had been recovered, but the other two remained in the Iron Crown of Morgoth. And then came the War of Wrath. The host of the Valar came to Middle-earth, and the destruction was beyond anything the world had seen. Mountains were cast down, rivers changed their courses, lands sank beneath the sea. The armies of Morgoth were utterly destroyed, and the Dark Lord himself was cast down from his throne, his iron crown beaten into a collar for his neck, and he was thrust through the door of night into the void beyond the world, to remain there until the end of all things. And the 2 remaining Silmarils were recovered. They were given into the keeping of Fëanor, the herald among the mightiest of the Mare after Sauron. And Maedhros and Maglor, the last surviving sons of Fëanor, came to him and demanded the jewels, the oath, the terrible, binding oath. It had driven them to murder their own kindred 3 times. It had led them to ruin and despair. And still it held them, still it demanded fulfillment. Still it would not let them rest. Inu refused to give them the Silmarils. He told them that their right to the jewels had been forfeit by their deeds, by the blood they had shed. He told them to return to Valinor and face the judgment of the Valar, and perhaps, in time, their right would be restored. But Maglor was wary. He wanted to take Enuma's counsel, to submit to judgment, to find some peace at last. And Maedhros, too, was wary, burned out by centuries of war and guilt, and the weight of the oath upon his spirit. But the oath would not let them rest. In the end, they stole the Silmarils. They crept into Enuma's camp and took the jewels, slaying the guards who stood in their way. One more crime, one more act to add to all the others. Each brother took 1 jewel, and the jewels burned them. The blessing of Vada, the hallowing that she had placed upon the Silmarils so long ago, recognized the evil that Maedhros and Maglor had done. The jewels rejected them, seared their flesh, caused them agony beyond endurance. Maedhros could not bear the pain. He threw himself into a chasm of fire, and the Silmaril went with him, down into the depths of the earth. And so 1 jewel was lost in the fires below. Maglor wandered to the seashore, his hand burning, his heart broken, and he cast his Silmaril into the sea, and it sank beneath the waves, and its light was lost in the deep waters. And so 1 jewel was lost in the sea, 3 Silmarils, 1 in the sky, 1 in the sea, in the earth. The light of the 2 trees, divided forever, never to be reunited until the end of all things. And Maglor, they say, wanders still along the shores of the world, singing laments for his losses, for his crimes, for the oath that bound him and the jewels that burned him. Some claim to have heard his voice on lonely beaches, a song of such sorrow that it brings tears to the eyes of any who hear it. Now, my friend, you might ask what all this means. Why does the tale of the Silmarils matter, here in this warm hobbit, hole so far removed the elder days? What lesson can we draw from these ancient sorrows? Perhaps there is no lesson. Perhaps the story is simply what it is, a tragedy of beauty and pride and obsession. A warning of what can happen when we love the works of our hands more than we love our kindred and our honor. But I think there is something more. The Silmarils were made to preserve light, to capture something beautiful and keep it forever, safe from the ravages of time and the malice of evil. And in that Fëanor succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. The light of the 2 trees still shines in the heavens, in the star that we call Igar Rendel, that bright beacon that rises in the west and gives hope to all who see it. But the price of that preservation was terrible. The cost was paid in blood and tears and endless sorrow, and in the end, the Silmarils could not be held by mortal hands, could not be possessed by any creatures, till touched by the shadows of the world. Perhaps the lesson is this: some things are not meant to be possessed. Some beauties are meant to be shared, to be seen and loved and then released, like a sunset or a song or a moment of perfect joy. The Silmarils could have been gifts to the world, lights that blessed all who saw them. Instead, they became prizes to be fought over, treasures that drove their owners to madness and ruin. Fëanor was the greatest of the Noldor, the most gifted and the most brilliant. But his gifts turned to curses because he could not let go, could not share, could not trust anyone else with the things he loved. And his sons were bound by that same possessiveness, that same desperate clinging, until the oath consumed everything they were and everything they might have been. But consider Beryl and Elithien. They sought a Silmaril not for its own sake, but for love. They were willing to risk everything, to give everything for each other. And though they too were touched by sorrow, though they too paid a terrible price, their tale is remembered as one of hope rather than despair. The difference, perhaps, is in the purpose of the quest. Fëanor sought to possess, Beren sought to prove his love. One desire led to darkness, the other to a light that still shines in the heavens. And Eorendil, sailing forever across the sky with the Silmaril upon his brow. He did not seek the jewel for himself. He sought it to bring hope to the world, to convince the Valar to have mercy on Middle-earth. And because his purpose was selfless, because he sought not to possess but to give, the Silmaril blessed him instead of burning him. There is wisdom here, I think. Deep wisdom that applies not only to jewels of great power, but to all the beautiful things of the world. We are not meant to possess beauty. We are meant to be touched by it, to be changed by it, to carry its memory in our hearts and share it with others. The moment we try to cage beauty, to lock it away where only we can enjoy it, we begin to turn it into something else, something darker and smaller and less than what it was. But enough philosophy. The fire is burning low, and the hour grows late. Let me speak a little more of the Silmarils, and then let us rest. You may wonder what became of the two trees, that sacred radiance that the Silmarils contained. Is it truly lost forever, scattered in sky and sea and earth, never to be reunited? There is a prophecy, spoken long ago, that tells of the end of all things. The Dagor Daggorath, the last battle, when Morgoth shall return from the void, and all the powers of good and evil shall meet in final conflict. In that battle, it is said, all that has been lost shall be found again. The Silmarils shall be recovered, and Fëanor himself shall be released from the halls of Mandos to break them open and release the light within. And Yavanna shall take that light, and rekindle the two trees, and the world shall be bathed once more in the radiance of the blessed, and all the sorrow of the ages shall be healed. But that is a tale for another time, a tale of things that have not yet come to pass, and may never come to pass, for the future hidden even from the wise. What matters now is what we can see and touch and hold in our hearts. And what I would have you hold in your heart, dear friend, is the image of that light. Imagine the two trees shining in Valinor, their silver and gold radiance mingling in perfect harmony. Imagine Fëanor, at the height of his power, capturing that light in jewels of surpassing beauty. Imagine Morgoth, dark and terrible, wearing the stolen Silmarils upon his brow, burning forever from their holy fire. Imagine Beren and Eldrithine standing before the throne of the Dark Lord, their love stronger than all the armies of the world. Imagine Eorendil sailing across the heavens, his ship a beacon of hope for all who dwell in Middle-earth. These images are part of you now. They live in your memory, in your imagination, in the place where stories dwell and grow and become part of who we are. The Silmarils may be scattered, but their light is not lost. It shines in the sky. It gleams in the depths of the sea. It burns in the heart of the earth. And it shines, too, in the hearts of all who remember the tale. That is the magic of stories, you see. They preserve things that would otherwise be lost. They capture moments and people and places and keep them safe, not in jewels of crystal, but in words and memories and the bonds we share with one another. Fëanor tried to preserve the light of the trees in works of his own making, and he succeeded, but at a cost he never imagined. We who tell and hear stories preserve the light of the past in a different way, a gentler way, a way that does not demand blood and tears and endless striving. When you tell the tale of the Silmarils to someone else, when you pass on what you have heard tonight, you become part of that preservation. The light lives on in you, and through you, it can reach others who have never heard the story. And so the chain continues unbroken, from the elder days to our own, and onward into a future that none can foresee. I have wandered long in this world, and I have seen many wonders and many sorrows. I have watched kingdoms rise and fall, have seen great heroes live and die, have witnessed the turning of ages and the changing of all things. But the stories remain. The stories are the thread that connects us to the past and to each other, the light that guides us through the darkness, the treasure that can never be stolen or lost. So remember the Silmarils, dear friend. Remember their beauty and their tragedy, their light and their shadow. Remember Fëanor, who made them, and was destroyed by his love for them. Remember the sons of Fëanor, bound by their terrible oath, driven to crimes that haunted them through all the ages. Remember Morgoth, who coveted the light and could never truly possess it, who wore the burning jewels upon his brow as a sign of his triumph and his torment. Remember Beren and elder Theon, who proved that love is stronger than darkness, that courage can accomplish what strength alone cannot achieve. Remember Rendil, sailing forever across the sky, a beacon for all who dwell in Middle-earth. Remember these things, and let them be a light in dark places when all other lights go out. The fire is very low now, and the shadows are growing long. But look through the round window of this hobbit hole. You can see the stars appearing in the sky, and their rising in the west is the brightest of them all. Rendil's star carried the Silmaril upon its brow, shining down upon a sleeping world. Let that light be your guide as you drift into dreams. Let the memory of the two trees, the beauty of the Silmarils, the courage of those who sought them, and the sorrow of those who were destroyed by them, settle into your heart like a gentle snow, covering all the worries and troubles of the day with a blanket of wonder. The world is full of beautiful things, dear friend. Some of them can be held in your hands, and some can only be held in your heart. The Silmarils were both, and that was their blessing and their curse. But the light they contained, the essence of the two trees, was never meant to be held at all. It was meant to shine, to bless, to illuminate the darkness of hope to those who dwell in shadow. And so it does. Even now, countless ages after the making of the Silmarils, countless years since the last of them was lost to sky and sea and earth, the light endures. It shines in the stars, in the memories of those who remember, in the stories that are passed from generation to generation. You carry that light within you now. It is part of your story, part of who you are becoming. And when you wake tomorrow, when you go out into the world and face whatever challenges await you, that light will be with you, a small flame of wonder and hope. Sleep now, dear friend. Let the fire fade to embers. Let the night wrap its gentle arms around you. Let the stars keep watch over your dreams. The tale of the Silmarils is told for tonight, but there will be other nights, other tales, other lights to guide us through the darkness. For now, rest. Rest and dream of silver trees and golden flowers, of jewels that held the light of heaven, of heroes who dared to reach for the impossible and sometimes, against all odds, succeeded. Dream of love that was stronger than death, of hope that survived despair, of beauty that endured even when all seemed lost. The light of the Silmarils shines on, in the sky above and in the stories we tell. And as long as there are those who remember, as long as there are those who tell the tales and those who listen, that light will never truly fade. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be gentle and your rest be deep, and may the light of Rendil guide you safely through the night, until the dawn comes and a new day begins. The Silmarils are scattered, but their story lives on, and stories, like light, can never truly die. Rest now, the tale is told, the fire sleeps, and so should you. Until next time, dear friend, until next the stars are shining and all is well. Sleep. The light endures. The memory remains. And somewhere, in the depths of the sea and the heart of the earth, and the heights of the heavens, the Silmarils shine on, waiting for the day when all things shall be made new, when the trees shall bloom again, and the light of the beginning shall return to bless a world grown weary with age and sorrow. But that day is far off, and tonight is for rest. Tonight is for peace. Tonight is for the gentle darkness that comes before the dawn, the darkness that is not an enemy but a friend, wrapping us in its soft embrace and carrying us safely to the shores of morning. Sleep, dear friend. Sleep and know that you are not alone. The stars watch over you, the stories hold you, the light, scattered though it may be, still shines, and I am here, old Gandalf, keeper of tales and wanderer of roads, sitting by the dying fire in this cozy hobbit hole, watching over you as you drift in, so all is well, all is as it should be. The Silmarils are lost, and the Silmarils are found. The tale is ended, and the tale goes on. The light has faded, and the light endures. Such is the way of things in this ancient world. Such is the mystery at the heart of all stories. Such is the truth that the Silmarils, in their beauty and their tragedy, teach us love what is beautiful, cherish what is precious. But do not cling so tightly that your love becomes a chain, your cherishing becomes a cage. Let the light shine through you, not be trapped within you. Share what you have been given. Pass on what you have received, and trust that the beauty you love will find its way to those who need it most. Fëanor could not do this, and his tale became a tragedy. Beren and Eldrithingen did do this, and their tale became a legend of hope. Eärendil did this, and his light still shines in the sky, a beacon for all the world to see. Which tale will yours be? What light will you carry? And how will you share it? These are questions for another day. Tonight is for rest. Sleep, and let the stories do their work within you. Let them settle into your bones, weave themselves into your dreams. Become part of the tapestry of who you are. And when you wake, you will be a little different than you were before. A little wiser perhaps. A little more attuned to the beauty and the sorrow of the world. A little more aware of the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness that cannot overcome it. That is the gift of stories. That is why I tell them, here in this hobbit hole, to those who come seeking tales of elder days. Not because the past was better than the present, not because the old stories are truer than the new, but because in the telling and the hearing, something passes between us, a light is kindled, a connection is made, and we are reminded that we are part of something larger than ourselves, a story that began before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. The Silmarils are part of that story. Sati, so are you. And so, in a way, the light lives on in all of us. Sleep now. Sleep, and carry the light with you into your dreams. When you wake, the world will still be here, with all its troubles and all its joys. But you will face it with the memory of the Silmarils in your heart, with the knowledge that even the greatest darkness can be overcome. That even the most precious things can be lost and yet somehow endure, that love and courage and hope are lights that no shadow can extinguish. The fire has gone to embers now. The night is deep and still. The stars are wheeling slowly overhead, among them the brightest of all, Eärendil's star, the Silmaril upon his brow, shining down upon a sleeping world. Let that light be the last thing you see before you close your eyes. Let it guide you into dreams of beauty and peace, and let it be the first thing you remember when you wake. A reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always light somewhere shining on, waiting to be found. Good night, dear friend. The tale of the Silmarils is told. The light endures, and so do we.